break, and we will return. Well, I've already said what's coming up in the show. Lots more of the same. And then we crack on with some T20 stuff and a Maxi 100. This is the Final Word Weekly Edition, Season 18, Episode 19. Virat Kohli is still my beating heart. Since the recording of So what we did with the last weekly show, I spoke to Ben Jones about the IPL final after you and I had done the bulk of it, which meant that at the time we didn't get the chance to reflect on Kohli describing Test cricket as 5 levels more important than winning the IPL. That's how much I value Test cricket. If you want to earn respect in world cricket all over, take up Test cricket, give your heart and soul to it, and earn the respect from legends. I mean, we're often accused of being too Kohli-centric on this show due to how much respect we have for him and the way he's gone about his cricket.
Hard not to be.
Hearing stuff like this, he would know he is doing that and going to piss off literally millions of people, and he does it anyway.
Particularly the ones in the stadium. Like, this is in his post-match interview just after they've won the final. And, of course, all the focus is on him because he has been there for literally 18 years, which is insane. Like, every single edition of the IPL he's played for RCB, and every single time they've lost it. And finally they get it. And even in that moment, he's willing to bring up Test cricket. You know, it's like chatting to your new partner about what your ex is up to. There'd be a fair bit of like, why are you bringing this up? I don't care if they just got a new job. You know, they get paid really well. Just moved into a nice house.
Yeah, why you're on their Instagram account in the first place? You know, what are you doing on there?
Exactly. And why are we talking about it now? We're supposed to be out to dinner. So. You know, it's very deliberate timing. Virat Kohli doesn't do things in a media sense by accident, right? He's well educated enough by now about how the world works.
The thought did cross my mind last week at one stage whether he might just try and rock up at the World Test final incognito, because he just loves Test cricket so much, and he lives in London anyway. Whether he might try and find a way of slipping in the back door and sitting at the back of the Edrich stand or something like that as a punter.
Just put a Markram shirt on and a helmet and just slip in and try to have a bat.
We spoke about this with Maxi recently when doing his retirement interview through One Day Cricket, that he it might have been in the book. Either way, one of the chats we've done where he can imagine himself being one of those guys that rocks up and scores Test cricket when he's older, which is on brand for Glenn. Anyway, it has already had a big effect. When we spoke with Sai Sudarshan on the podcast a couple of years ago when he did his first stint with Surrey, he talked about Kohli. He talked about the inspiration, the reason why he wants to be a Test cricketer, and he probably will be not long from now in England with the Test starting in a few days from now. And Kohli has informed and influenced that generation of guys who are in their teens into their 20s, finding a way through, and they want to be the next Kohli, and that doesn't just require being a T20 specialist. It requires doing the full bit. And I love the fact that these words might influence the next group of, 12 and 13-year-olds who are trying to work out their way in the world.
That's the key, is that you've got sort of 20 to 22, 23-year-olds who are already in the Kohli camp because of having grown up with him, like your Jayaswal types and so on, who see Test cricket as the top, your Sarfaraz Khan, those kind of players in their 20s. And then, it's whether Kohli, maybe through another couple of years of IPL, can continue having that influence, can add another 10 or 12 years of influence in terms of getting sort of instilling that idea into kids, and then whether it's Jayaswal or Sudarshan or whoever it is who becomes the next generational superstar, whether they can then pass that on down the line. It's one of the best things that Test cricket has going for it, because the descriptions are so doomy. Fidel Fernando, who we've worked with, the headline on his last piece, which no one writes the headlines, or no one who writes the piece, but describing Test cricket as a format with one foot out the door. And it's not that yet. Like, maybe it is for Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, who are playing at the moment, but it still isn't. Like, the demise has been predicted for a long time, but something like this is the biggest advantage that it has. The biggest weapon in its armory is that respect by players of note within the economic powerhouse of the game.
Yeah, people have been writing off Test cricket since its inception in one form or another. Any study of history shows that this is the most recent. Test cricket will survive. It's just about what form we wish it to survive in and how we want to see it grow and have a chance. Like, there's an interesting reporting out of Nepal over the last couple of days, which is often led by Andrew Leonard, who's an outstanding broadcaster and journalist who's been on the Final Word in the past, about them wanting to be a Test playing nation. Like, and rightly so. Why wouldn't they want to be a test playing nation? They have done so much to advance their cause, playing in World Cups, producing players that have been able to star on the global stage, and they want to be a full member of the ICC. So we often run this conversation through the case of Scotland, because they're so close to being eligible to be a full member and thus play test matches. But it doesn't strike me that Scotland have got much enthusiasm for this. Their players absolutely do, but they'll be let down by their administrators because they won't care. Ultimately, they'll end up in the same vortex, the same conversation as they always do.
Yeah.
The players want it, but it feels like in Nepal, it's a unified thing where they all aspire towards having test cricket over there. And why should we be constantly talking about retracting and reducing when there are countries out there who could add to the wonderful texture of it? And test cricket has routinely been improved by more countries playing it across decades.
So that was all in the aftermath of the Bangalore win, and then there was the horrible other part of aftermath the next day when a huge crowd showed up to the Chinnaswamy to see the team and see the trophy, and we ended up with one of those awful crowd crushes. 11 people killed in that crush, basically just presumably suffocation from being jammed into the crowd. The reporting is that it wasn't enough people to be completely capacity, but they weren't in the ground. They were sort of trying to get into the ground, and there were only a couple of gates. So the gates became a choke point, and obviously the crowd control failed dismally. So there's a police investigation underway. The grounds are controlled by the state associations. So Karnataka Association controlled the ground, but there are RCB officials who would have sort of allowed the event, presumably, and apparently they also had an events management company that was supposedly in charge of some part of it. So there are 3 different branches of officials being investigated, and that could get very complicated. Layers of policing in India are complicated, with city police and state police and federal authorities, and a lot of jurisdictional competition between them from what we've seen when attending games there over the years. So probably it'll take a long time for all of this to shake out, but it was a horrible follow-up to what was this moment of relief and jubilation for those RCB fans. Yeah,
it's a total nightmare. Some young people were included in that death toll as well, and just imagine that you're going to celebrate something that means so much to you and losing a family member. It just doesn't even... I remember when I was a kid reading about what happened at Hillsborough in 1989 and just being like completely overwhelmed about sort of feeling that, right, being a football fan, being a sports fan, knowing what those emotions are like, and then ending up in a situation like this. I mean, people obviously should be held to account. I hope that this investigation does do exactly that, and that there can be some justice at some level for what's happened there.
Yeah, so it's hard to process that in terms of the elation and then the devastation of what happened there. There's been a lot of news out of India. This is an India heavy program, and it comes back to something else with the Anderson-Tendulkar Trophy that we went to early on. We thought that they'd dismissed this as an idea, but apparently it seems they haven't.
Well, this has been going around for about a month now, right? Pataldi Trophy, which recognises the Nawab of, and also the Tiger. Like it was struck to recognise the achievements of the great captain of Indian cricket through the late 60s into the 70s, and of course the connection of the man who played for both countries before India was a test playing nation, playing for England in the Bodyline series of 32, 33, and then onwards thereafter. So, I mean, the whole idea of that was to recognise the link between the nations through that family. And it feels like, despite the fact that there was reporting a couple of weeks ago saying it had been knocked on the head, it's now back again. So the Tendulkar-Anderson, or the Anderson-Tendulkar Trophy, it will be here. A lot of angry people in India, and I get it, and I feel like I'm one of them. Like, why are we doing this? This is an exercise in it doesn't strike
discarding history.
Well, it's discarding history, and it's also a sugar hit, isn't it? Because they're 2 players of a recent generation. So therefore, let's scrap one trophy and replace it with another. And I saw Sunil Gavaskar, who often has the most strident opinions out of the India media. He's absolutely fuming about this. Jimmy, understandably, is chuffed. Why wouldn't you be? It's not Jimmy's fault that this is playing out this way. He rightly is feeling quite honoured by this. And Sachin Tendulkar, in some reporting I read from India, he's mindful of the Pataldi piece to this. He's said, I'm not sure if it was on the record or if it was briefed, that he's very mindful of showing respect to that family and not wanting the trophy to be eliminated entirely. There's some chat that it might be handed to the player of the series, but that's different. That's not the same as being the trophy. So there was another storyline that maybe it'll only be presented in test matches in England between the countries because there's another trophy in India as it is.
Well, that's how it has been historically. They've got the Anthony de Mello, which is the for series played in India, and the Patowdy for series played in England. So split trophy situation, which maybe that means a little bit more. Like it'd be interesting if the Ashes were split between series in Australia and England. If you could hold both at the same time, that would mean more than holding one, like winning one at home and then retaining it away in the way that Australia have done. But it's just such a recency bias, kind of bizarre decision. So. Okay, I suppose you can argue it makes a degree of sense in that these are the two players with the highest test match tallies played, because Anderson got to 188 and might have caught Tendulkar with another year or so. But you've got, I mean, they played against each other 14 times. It's not a vast sample size. It's not the most number of tests that they ever played against each other.
Interesting, the totals, the overall tallies. I mean, what happens if Joe Root ends up overtaking Tendulkar for runs? Then what happens? Anyway,
the Anderson-Root Trophy.
Yeah, that'll be popular.
It's just not that big a rivalry. Like I don't think like Tendulkar. You think about maybe the Dale Steyn rivalry or some of the earlier career ones. It's not like Anderson and Tendulkar was box office that you had to tune in to watch. I think Anderson got Tendulkar out more than anyone, but it was like 9 times. It wasn't that. It's not like it's a defining thing. And then Tendulkar in the tests he played that Anderson played didn't do that well. I think he might have made 100, average 30 odd. So it wasn't like it was an epic rivalry. It doesn't feel like there's a reason between them. They feel disconnected and disjointed.
It's because they're the two highest profile players, and whereas with as much as I hated them getting rid of the Wisden Trophy, the Viv Richards and Ian Botham are best mates. There was that enduring link between the two of them going back to Somerset in the early 70s. I mean, there was some context. This is just like, Sachin's the biggest Indian name and Anderson's the biggest English name.
And Tendulkar doesn't need more stuff. He's good. He's got enough stuff. He's fine. And Anderson has been celebrated and feted plenty over the last couple of years in England. It's okay. He's got an end named after him at Old Trafford. Like it does bug me as people who do what we do, which is going into cricket history and looking at the stories of the past, to discard those as, that's irrelevant. No one's heard of Tiger Patowdy. Well, they should have. And why not address that? Why not spend your time as you go into a series trying to share the information, the stories about, we've got a chapter in the Storytime book about the two Nawabs of Patowdy and Iftikhar Ali Khan Patowdy and the way that their influence over such a long period of time. And Gavaskar would have played with Tiger Patowdy in the back end of Tiger's career in the early 70s. And
definitely.
It's there's a reason why it matters to Gavaskar, and that probably should mean that that's something where people should pay some attention. Anyway.
So moving on from, I feel like we've spoken about India stuff for the vast majority of the show. We'll move on from that now to New Zealand, actually, to the team that Gary Stead has been coaching with some distinction for some years, including the World Test Championship final of 2021, going back to when they held the mace aloft, the first team to do so. By any yardstick, the most successful coach New Zealand have had when they went to number one as the Test team. Of course, the World Cup final of 2019 that wasn't quite, but then, of course, other team success making other finals, the World Cup T20 final in 2022. There'll be others as well, Jeff, that I can't immediately recall. But broadly speaking, since Gary Stead's taken over, this team has been one that has been consistently at the very top of the major tournaments and been able to be the best of themselves for the majority of that time, I reckon. I don't think they've really had a slump in that stretch.
No.
If they have, they've been able to arrest it before a major tournament, or they've always been able to perform commendably in the World Test Championship as well. They were only a couple of wins away from making the final in this cycle.
Yeah, it could have. They were an outside chance there. So it was 2021 when they made the T20 World Cup final, the one in the UAE. The 50-over final in 2019 and the Champions Trophy final earlier this year. So 3 finals of major tournaments, made the semis in the 50-over World Cup in India 2 years ago, and made the semis in the T20 World Cup in 2024. So pretty remarkable run of success in white ball, World Test champions as well in the inaugural one. So that'll always be, that's in there. You can't take that away from me category. So it sounds like Gary Stead was pitching just doing the Test team, but good luck getting New Zealand cricket to spend money on having two coaches, because they're reluctant to spend money on anything apparently. So that was declined, but he's done the job for 7 years. It's a fair run.
Yeah, you're right about. I mean, I'm sceptical about the direction in New Zealand at the moment off the field when it comes to Test cricket.
When you said Scotland and their reluctance to commit to things, New Zealand cricket was the administration that sprung to mind.
It does feel that way. They are addicted to these two Test series, which. I mean, I know it's not the case. Well, we were at one last year, right? We were at one between New Zealand and Australia. Remarkable. That was only two Test matches and no real appetite for a third. The only time you get a third,
despite how good they were,
right? The only time you get a third's when England are there because of the extra tourists they bring. But that's definitely a point that's worth backing over. And like what it looks like next for him, I'd imagine that Gary Stead will be in good nick. I'm not sure whether he's formally in the hunt for any of the jobs that are doing the runs.
I'm sure he is. It sounded between the lines in his presser. Right. I'll take some time to rest and reset, but still keen to explore coaching. He wants to go to the IPL.
No, he's going to end up
where?
He's going to end up like coaching Pakistan, isn't he?
Oh, surely
because their current coach is going to.
If they pay up front.
Yeah.
If they pay up front, you could do
cash.
Cash.
I'd want a bag of cash.
Yeah.
To do that job.
I
wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to be invoicing Pakistan cricket.
No,
because that it'll sit longer. I won't name certain media organisations who take. The worst I ever had was that I think I had an 18-month invoice outstanding with one media org. I
had 4 years. I had a 4-year invoice.
Yeah. You do get it with some of those who realise that their money's worth more today than it will be down the track, increment marginally when considering
inflation's at 3%. You wait 4 years, you save 12% on your invoice. Happy days.
But yes, yes. And the other part of the New Zealand story at the moment is I don't think anyone really knows what's going on with Kane Williamson. So he gave an answer at Cricket Connect. So I don't think I'm speaking out of school here because this was a public forum and it's nothing that he wouldn't have said publicly. Where the vibe I got was pick and choose era for Kane now. Mm-hmm. No central contract. I'm not saying he won't play Test cricket. He's played Test cricket absent a central contract for the last 12 months, possibly, something like that. It's been a while now.
I think this will be the second time he's declined it.
Right. No, okay, that's fine. But if he's now diversifying his interests, his wife's English, lives here for a slab of the year, playing with Middlesex and playing for the Spirit now. He's got so much to give, though. He's only 34 recently. He's played 105 Test matches, nearly 9,300 runs at 55 with 3,300s. We speak a lot about Root overtaking Sachin for runs. Well, if not for these fucking two Test series, Kane would be a decent chance of overtaking Tendulkar for hundreds, you know what I mean? If he were playing as much Test cricket as England or Australia or indeed India, he'd have that opportunity. But with two Test series,
he seems older, though. I don't know if it's just the beard, but he seems like an old man compared to, like, he seems older than Kohli, who is a few years older than him.
Yeah, well, he started doing it so young, didn't he? So that's the New Zealand story here. So there'll be a new coach appointed there in the fullness of time. Jeff, there is a Test match going on at the moment between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, which is this the first Test of the new cycle? I think it is. I think this is a WTC test. I don't think this was.
It must be.
In fact, I know it is. This was the first series, and of course, there's two more starting in 5 minutes: England, India, and Australia, and going to the Windies. But so Bangladesh with Sri Lanka, Angelo Matthews last hurrah.
Yes, and this other bit of interest in Tarindu Ratnayaka, who's bowling finger spin with both arms. Yes, Mendes can do that, but, he's a part-timer. He doesn't bowl that much. Ratnayaka is a frontline spinner, and he came on and bowled about 15 overs of off-spin and then just immediately decided to start bowling left-arm orthodox. He's going back and forth between them. He's picked up a couple of wickets, both with the off-breaks, so far relatively early, and then it's settled for batting.
Oh, yeah.
So after day one, Shanto and Mushfiqur Rahim had both turned up. We're in a rain break on day two at the time of recording. So Shanto, one of your favourites, made 148. Mushy, 159 not. He's made doubles in Test cricket.
Can't stop.
might be number 4 coming, and Lytton Das, whose work you also enjoy, 61 not out, so he might just make one as well. We could be in for one of these absolute run fests.
Tigerland, yeah, if they can get a couple of wins away from home, a win away from home, as we know, as Pat Cummins was saying the other day, wins away from home count for an awful lot in the World Test
What is
Championship.
it with Gaul? Gaul is either 750 or it's all out 120 both sides.
Different sides of the square, isn't it? I think we had this. I think Brad and I were trying to work this out recently. Different sides of the square present very different. It's like the old compare the pair superannuation ads, retail fund versus industry fund. On one side of the square, you're getting Prabhath Jayasuriya is taking 7 for spit. The other side, Uzi's making a 2-day double 100 in the most recent series that we were at.
So they got the old curator back with the brown paper envelopes. Is that involved?
Oh gosh, I feel like we know Gaul so well now. Baz and I was saying this when we were there recently. Like we know every inch of that fort. We know every restaurant, every bar. It would seem. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I look forward to returning to Gaul next time the opportunity presents itself. Maybe the World Cup next year if we're super organised. Although I don't really know how much of that's been played in Gaul. Certainly, Colombo is a major venue in that. They'll use Gaul, won't they, in that T20 World Cup?
I'll take this moment mentioning Gaul just to send my respects into the ether to the Dairy King, the ice cream magnate of Gaul, who passed away just before the last tour. Bharat and I made firm friends with DK during the previous trip to Sri Lanka, and if you think I'm being somewhat facetious by calling him the Dairy King, that is what he insisted on being called. That was his shop, and he very much enjoyed having that as a title as well. So, Bharat was very much looking forward to going back to see him. It was the main thing I was sad about when I couldn't make the trip was that I wouldn't get to see DK. Sadly, when Bharat popped into the store, got the news that he'd passed away recently, about a month or so before we got back there, but he was a great man, and he sold great ice cream, and was a very solid companion for us in those power failure nights when we would all sit out the front of the rental joint or out the front of the store and have a little drink and enjoy the sea breeze with the lights out, chatting to the Dairy King. So go well, King.
I think the actual shop's not there anymore either, sadly. So we did go up there when we first arrived a few months ago now. So, an appropriate tribute to someone we met in our travels. Occasionally our travels take us to Hobart, not as often as I would like. I'd love to be an annual Hobart tourist in the way that we go to Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, but these days it tends to be 5 test matches, and it's been a little while since we did that Ashes test in 21-22. Now, a bit going on here politically. It's just worth backing over. We did ask Todd Greenberg about this, who was more interested in the configuration of the redeveloped stadium with respect to the roof, and that's the cricket concern is to do with the shade and how it might work. But obviously this is a broader story, the political machinations there in the Tasmanian lower house, the vote of no confidence, which, I mean, did anyone really expect that to get up? Votes of no confidence and so on are put all the time, and they never actually get anywhere.
Brought by the opposition.
Because governments have numbers to control supply and to control confidence, and in this instance,
so was there a floor crossing that got them up?
Yeah, unexpectedly the crossbenchers got on board, and it was all a bit messy. And I don't.
Was it a minority government in Tassie?
So they had an election last year, and it returned a Liberal minority government. So
what it means for our international listeners, a Tory minority government. Yeah, because we're confusing.
Well, in Tasmania, I would describe it more a Liberal government, to be honest with you. Like the way the Liberal Party is there, it's more traditionally the way the Liberal Party was conceived of before it changed radically in the last, let's call it 15 years, to be far more Republican in the American sense, as opposed to the Liberal in the Robert Menzies sense, or maybe even the John Howard sense, if you want to go back to more recent history.
Republican in the Alex Jones injecting rhinoceros blood into his main vein, sort of.
Certainly the Victorian branch, fuck me, woolly dooly, that lot, they're fucking mad.
Well, the South Australians are up there too.
South Australians, they're usually all right. Alex
Antic is a...
Oh, yeah. Is he even in the Liberal Party anymore? Well, you won't be for long if he is. There are certain branches of the Liberal Party that are crazier than others, and Victoria are on the front of that grid. But anyway, Tassie. So the reason I bring it up is that, well, the reason we should be talking about it is that the stadium's in jeopardy, and that will have a big effect on cricket. The reason the stadium's in jeopardy is that even though the Labor opposition and the government both support the stadium. Probably different. It'll be difficult for me to explain the nuance on how they see the stadium being built. I'm sure there's differences of opinion there, but threshold point, they both want it. This is the big new stadium at Macquarie Point. If the Parliament's returned with a bunch of independents and crossbenchers who don't want the stadium, well, then what do? They may not have a majority to do what they need to do politically to keep the thing moving, and they're already late on deadlines and that type of thing. So the whole thing's been weaponised. And
I'm pretty sure state Labor don't want the responsibility of being the ones to commit to it and sign the contracts and push it. They're quite happy for the other lot to do that because it's a poison chalice. Because there's quite a lot of discontent and opposition, they don't want to have to be the ones to cop the blow back if and when things go wrong and costs blow out and everything. As they always do, which it inevitably will. Yeah. They want to be able to point at it and say, "Well, the Libs signed that one. That was them."
And Dean Winter, when he became opposition leader, was very strong on no, Labor categorically supports the stadium. So it's not really a Liberal Labor thing. It's more about what might happen with the crossbench and therefore what might happen with the stadium. So we'll keep an eye on that one because, it could have a big effect on what happens to Tassie and cricket in the short term. If they've got a shiny new stadium, you can expect they will get more test cricket, or more things will come their way anyway. If they're still playing at Bellerive as much as we adore it, harder to make that case in the short to medium term. Jeff, we're not far away from our next break. What I might quickly do, though, is I had an idea. We did what we were describing it. We're doing the IPL in 6 balls, weren't we?
Overs.
An original,
we're doing
what an original idea.
Really nailed it.
It worked. Jonesy was great. I love doing that. Instead, we're going to try and have a crack at doing the Vitality Blast, as it's known over here, in 120 seconds. Don't know why. 120 balls, 120 seconds, you're with me. So men's comp, Northamptonshire Steelbacks Buffs team. They're 6-1 and having a laugh. They are top of the table in the North group from Durham, Lancashire and Leicester in the top 4. In the South group, Somerset are 5-1, Sussex are 4-1 with a washout, Surrey just behind them, and likewise Glamorgan. Down the bottom of the table, Gloucestershire in the South group yet to win a game. Essex and Middlesex both struggling as well. Middlesex struggling to such an extent that they have sacked the coach overnight. Overnight, Richard Johnson has.
Gary Stead's available.
Yes. Well, they made a decision that they were going to, as they said, part ways with their coach, having parted ways with their previous coach, Stuart Law, a couple of years ago. So having got them promoted but relegated straight away, and they've not had any meaningful success in white ball cricket. So he is leaving.
Postecoglou's available.
Yeah.
Get Big Ange in there. And Angelo Matthews is almost available. Get Big Ange and Big Ange in maybe as a dream team, maybe together. Maybe rivals. I don't know. Friendly animosity.
Maybe. I've loved the very, very strong opinions from Australia about Postecoglou being sacked without kind of realising that that's just what happens over here. Like if you don't perform in the Premier League, your manager gets sacked. No one cares about anything else that's going on. That's just that's the culture and how it differs from what we're conditioned to in Australian sport, where you're given a bit more latitude and a bit more leeway. Anyway, and yes, that's the men's side of the equation. On the women's side, Surrey are flying. They've only dropped 1 game so far in that League One. In second spot are Notts, who we're not going to call the Blaze. Birmingham, Hampshire round out the top 4. And in League 2, where there are fewer games being played, Yorkshire and Middlesex are the top of the North and the South groups, respectively. The reason we're not doing the Blast in great detail is we would be taking the piss. There is so much going on right now. There are 133 games in the Blast on the men's side of the equation. To try and give you a précis of that would be disingenuous. So we're not going to even bother. But it's a great comp. It does what it's meant to do. It's an elite tournament with overseas players, with often great crowds, and it sits at a time of year when people really want to be at the cricket. Beautiful long nights. We were playing at 9:30 last night, Jeff. It was gorgeous. So it's all lovely and beautiful, but it's too big and too unwieldy to keep on top of, especially when there's so much international cricket going on.
You're just about at the summer solstice in a couple more days. So the nights are long and gentle in the UK at this time. On the way to the break, if you check the show notes for this program or other previous ones, you will find the Wisden Almanac link that gives you 50% off if you subscribe. Why would you not want a large yellow book big enough to stun an intruding snake with if you needed to, but also small enough to fit in the palm of your hand as you wander around the house looking up the statistics, the minutiae of the last 12 months in cricket, the previous year, before you add it to your shelf with all your other Wisdens that you collect, because you follow cricket, so you're probably pretty into things being sequential and having complete sets of them. Half half price. It's an expensive book if you buy one, and deservedly, because there are thousands of pages and millions of words and lots of people to pay for their contributions. But half price is a big discount.
I'm looking at, as I did on Storytime, the 91 edition, which is in my hand at the moment. One that champions the career of Richard Hadlee, the life of Sir Leonard Hutton. It lamented the ball that year, which we talked about on Storytime in 1990, where the ball went down to, what did we say the other day?
11 strands.
9 strands from 15 strands, and changed the complete complexion of the county.
You can't drop 6 strands. I've always said it. You can't just go taking 6 strands out and expect things to be consistent.
And I love this. On the cover, a genuinely great cricketer, an assessment of Graham Gooch, friend of the show. Well, at least a former guest of the show. I don't like text Gucci or anything. I'd like to text Gucci. I'd like to know what's going on in his. I'd like to imagine reading his WhatsApps in that really high delivery accent that he's got. But yes, wisdomalmanac.com/subscribe.
You could have Phil Walker read the text to you in his Graham Gooch voice, which is pretty good.
It is indeed. 50% off the recommended retail price, which is about 55 quid these days. So never, ever, ever pay full price for your Wisdons. Subscribe, get it every single year. 35% site-wide discount on bloomsbury.com as well. All sorts of great books and other bits and pieces that we've seen and supported with Bloomsbury over the years. It includes the Night Watchman, Wisden Cricket Monthly, and so on it goes. So wisdomalmanac.com/subscribe and get yourself a subscription to the good book. Back in a moment.